I'd like to welcome you all to our third lecture in the Department of Computer Science Faculty Lecture Series. Today it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Calvin Gotlieb, who is Professor Emeritus of Computer Science. And Kelly is one of the founders of DCS, Computer Science, and has had a very long and distinguished career that basically shows no signs of stopping anytime soon, which is great. The lecture today is part of our celebration of Kelly's 90th birthday, and we're going to have a great dinner and reception this evening to celebrate that event. And one thing I will mention, organizational-wise, there'll be a couple buses that'll come in the front of the building to take you over to Hart House, or you can walk if you can. It's not very far. Now, Kelly is widely regarded as being the father of computing in Canada, which, when you think of the impact of computers in our society and our economy, is a pretty phenomenal accolade. However, it is an accolade that's well-deserved when one examines the history of Kelly's incredible contributions over the years. These contributions have been partly, but only partly, acknowledged in the long list of prestigious awards Kelly has been given. These include fellowships in the Royal Society of Canada, the Association of Computing Machinery, the British Computing Society, and the Canadian Information Processing Society. He's also been given 4 honorary doctorates from the University of Toronto, the University of Waterloo, the Technical University of Nova Scotia, and the University of Victoria. And of course, to acknowledge the fact that Kelly's contributions have been felt far outside the academic world. He was invested as a member of the Order of Canada in 1996, and part of the citation was for being largely responsible for leading Canadians into the modern age of computing. In 1948, the University of Toronto, with funding from the National Research Council of Canada, established a computation center. Kelly was named the director of this center. However, by my calculations, he was only 27 years old at the time. So he was considered to be far too junior to have the title of director. So instead, he was given the title of chief computer. As chief computer, Kelly worked towards obtaining Canada's first electronic digital computer, which was a Ferranti Mark I, based on the Manchester computers. This was the world's first commercially available computer, and the machine was brought to Toronto and dubbed the Ferret, to stand in for Ferranti U of T. And it was put to use in a number of ways that had an astonishing impact on Canada. For example, it played a pivotal role in the construction of the St. Lawrence Seaway, some of the computations that were done for the engineering work. Now, academics usually, we measure our impact by citation counts, by the number of invited talks, the number of students we've graduated. Kelly can measure his career in measures that belittle these kinds of measures, strokes that have to do with changing an entire nation. So without much further ado, I'm going to turn the stage over to Kelly, who is going to tell us some more about his career and his early work with computers here at U of T and the other impacts that he's had in a talk entitled Chiefly About Computing, which I believe is a play on his original title of Chief Computer. Kelly?
Thank you. In 1985, I didn't retire from professor. My salary retired in 1985, but I didn't. And I continued to lecture in this building until about 4 years ago to undergraduates. But it's nice to be home again. Thank you. As I say, this talk is chiefly about computers. When you want to give a talk of history, of course, we could talk about the people who programmed, who wrote programs, and who did the computing. We could talk about the programs or we could talk about the early computers, those that were designed, built, boarded, and I'm going to use that essentially to sequence my talk, but I'll intersperse comments about peoples and programs as we go to it. So, in the beginning, actually the first thing about computer came in about 1946. I'm pretty sure that's the exact date. Three professors, B.A. Griffith, A.F.C. Stevenson in math, applied math, and V.G. Smith, electrical engineering, applied for and got a grant. At 1946, I'll talk about ENIAC in a little, but ENIAC was announced in 1946, and it was the first stored programmable electronic computer. It actually was working on the atomic bomb before that, but it was all secret. So in 1946, the world learned about ENIAC.
So I'm just going to hold this on your hair. Do you want if I tie you?
Okay. So in 1946, the world learned about ENIAC, and lots of people got interested in electronic computers. And they wanted to have one and make one. And so these three professors at the U of T applied for a grant to study computers. They attended conferences about them in USA. And let's see, can you change it to the other?
Oh, sorry, I thought I full screen that.
Thank you. And they actually, there was a need to do some special, at that time, people were talking about building the St. Lawrence Seaway. And in fact, they assembled some team to do calculations essentially called backwater, which is the flooding that takes place when you build the dams. So these were quite extensive flooding. So they then got a grant to get an IBM 402, so-called a tabulating computer, to do these backwater calculations. Now all these professors, as I say, started in '46, and they installed that IBM installation of the tabulator card sorting machine, card punches, standard IBM cards. Many of you will remember them probably because they were using computers for quite a while. And data could be added or subtracted, but by mechanical relays you could, by repeated addition, you could make a tabulator do multiplication. But it was very slow on it. Essentially, if you wanted to do 7 times 8, you would add in 7/8. That's the way you multiplied by the machine. So you can imagine that the wiring in it was pretty slow. It was housed in the basement of the Pratt building, where half the computer science department. Then at that time, that was the physics building. It was called the McLennan Physical Laboratory. Well, the people who were doing that backwater calculations there are 3 of them. Beatrix Helen Worsley. She had a PhD. And her supervisor was Douglas Hartree, a very famous British mathematician. And there was another fellow, Stanley Perham, who was a mathematician, but I forgot where he did his degree. And then there was an engineer from the hydro, because they were doing these calculations, backwater calculations for the hydro. His name was Tom Hogg. So those 3 were actually were the computing team when I joined it. So I joined it. Now, why did I join it? Well, I got a BA in mathematics, physics and chemistry in 1942, but I immediately joined the Proximity Fuse Project, which essentially was a project for putting fuses, the thing that fired a shell, an anti-aircraft gun, into the shell. And it's emitted a radio signal, which would be reflected from the aircraft. And the thing was very successful when it finally got done. But when I did it, when I joined in 42, hadn't been completed yet. But, the radio signal is kind of butterfly. So if the shell is going right to the airplane, it's not sensitive, and it doesn't go off until it's near there. It incidentally goes off from the reflected signal, like a radar signal from the. So it recognizes the metal of the aircraft, and it. And I actually have. This was after the atomic bomb. This was the second most secret project in the war, all through the war. So this project was hugely classified. I've actually got a model of it now. Eventually, as I say, when I finished, when the war finished, I and two other people who I'll identify in a minute got our PhDs, but the PhD was classified, and it still is to this day. If you look up my PhD on the trajectory of a yawing shell, that's all you get. So they never declassified the thesis. But eventually they did let the three of us write a paper, which I have a copy of it. And this I stole from the so, of course, if you come down and look at them, you see they're real vacuum tubes, very tiny vacuum tubes in here, encased in wax. So when the gun exploded, the tube didn't break. And so I've got a few props here, and that's one of them. But during that work, we had to we had to do trajectory calculations, because we used to sometimes prop up the gun, and the sergeant says, "I can't fire that gun because I haven't got range tables for it. This is not an anti-aircraft gun. You're using it as an anti-aircraft." Well, we say, "Oh, don't worry, we're mathematicians. We can do that." So we would calculate the trajectory of these shells, which went almost straight up, but we knew nothing about the upper wind velocity, so the shell could fall anywhere. And sometimes it hit the dugout we were there. It had no high explosive, of course, but so when we were testing it. So, the mathematicians think they can do anything. But I've lost my slide thing again.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, so that was my background. I did some other work from 46 to 48. I was a consultant to the RCF, and then we allowed us to publish that paper. Became, I guess I can do it. Keep wandering off. Can you fix that so it'll stay? I think, but I want to be able to read the slide.
Oh, this is, yeah.
Oh, all I do is touch it, eh? So bring it back. Thank you. So a lot of universities, as soon as UNIVAC was announced in 1946, a lot of universities started to work on computers. At Princeton, the Institute for Advanced Studies, at MIT, at Cambridge in UK, at the Moore School of Engineering in Philadelphia, where ENIAC had been built, at the University of Illinois, at Harvard. All these universities started working with computers. So at the U of T, we expanded. We started taking in graduate students, and among them, one of the earliest was Joseph Cates, who I know he's going to be at the dinner, and I think he must be at the audience. He was my first student, as I'll say in a minute. In fact, was my first PhD student while I was still physics. And William Ratz joined the team essentially to work on the electrical part of computers. But we didn't have any design or model for an electronic computer. So Joe first built actually a machine out of relays that played out of vacuum tubes, actually. He had worked at Rogers Radio, and he knew a lot about tubes, so he built a machine that played tic-tac-toe, which was exhibited at the CNE and made all the newspapers. You could play against this machine, which of course, as you know, if it goes first, you can't beat it because it would take the center square. And then Joe built a radio tube, which actually was capable of adding 2 binary numbers. Trixie Worsley, who was already a member of the staff, she built a small differential analyzer, which has something called integrating tables, and that was actually not a digital computer, an analog computer that had been designed by Vannevar Bush, and she built it out of mechano parts, as she had done for her thesis at Cambridge, Massachusetts. They wanted computers, they needed the computer to do backorder calculations badly, and nobody had built any electronic computers yet. So I heard about a Bell Labs computer built out of relays, just like the IBM machine, that was more powerful than any machine that IBM sold. It capable of dealing with imaginary numbers. And I actually went to Bell Labs in New Jersey and met with the designer of the machine, who at that time had retired and was living in Burlington, Vermont. And he gave me a stack of diagrams of blueprints about that high to take back with me to build a copy of this machine. So we decided that we would build a copy, but although they gave me the infinity, taking back the blueprints, kind of fun bringing back, they were marked confidential. When I went through customs, the customs agent said, "Can I see them?" I said, "No, you can't. They're confidential." Well, he said, "You better come off the train with me." So I came off the train, and he went through a huge book, turning pages, until he found a page which says that if you're building a factory, you paid for the blueprints you brought in by weight. So he took all these blueprints and weighed them and charged me $75 to bring them in the country. But when I tried to get it on my expense account, they told me that I was a servant of His Majesty and I was allowed to bring things in duty-free. So I never got that $75 back for the blueprints. When we decided to build them, Bell decided that we'd have a $20,000 fee. They didn't mind giving me the blueprint, but if we were going to make a copy, they wanted a licensing fee. And so I went with Professor Leopold Infeld, who had worked with Einstein, and we were good friends. I had sat in on his relativity courses, so on. We went to a National Research Council to ask him if they would provide us with $20,000 to buy the blueprints. Well, they had a meeting while we were there, actually, and they decided while I was out of the room that really they didn't want to build this machine. And I think they really decided correctly that this was not state-of-the-art. It was not, the machine was limited in what it could do, and there's no doubt that the decision not to build it was right. However, Norman Mackenzie, who was head of HighSpeed, he took me aside and he says, "I want you to know that when we're not giving you the $20,000, it's not that we don't have confidence in you. We just think that's not the right thing to do. But you go ahead and work on an electronic machine." And I thought, that was really very generous of him because and also very smart of him not to let us build that dead end. At that point, the very famous copy of a programming manual on how to program an electronic computer. And everybody decided, all the other universities decided to build an electronic computer that was essentially a copy of ENIAC. Now, ENIAC was vacuum tubes, so build a vacuum tube computer, a copy of ENIAC. And called the von Neumann machine, which is the model for for a basic machine consisting of a multiplying unit, a control unit, a memory, an auxiliary store, and I/O devices. These are the components on it. So we expanded the team. We took on more programmers, undergraduates and graduates, Leonard Casciato, Bob Johnson, and then we took on Jim Mayberry for the electronic part to help Cates and others on the electronic part, and Jim Mayberry and Donald Gillies, undergraduate program. These people, all, especially Mayberry and Donald Gillies, eventually went to the United States and became quite famous in early building in the United States. And we decided that we would build a model of the big computer just to make sure before we spent all the money in a big one. It had a high-speed parallel memory with 32 12-bit words. So 12 bits, today an alphabetic character takes about 6 or 7 bits. So it's really 2 characters with the word length. So you can see that this was really a stripped-down machine. But it was all binary. Only 8-bit, 3 instructions. So this machine only had 8 instructions, had 3 binary bits, 2 to the third is 8. So and a paper tape. And the strength of this model that we were building, NRC approved a grant for $300,000 to build a big machine. We said, we'll build a model first, and then we want to go on to a full-size machine. And they gave us $300,000. In fact, they gave us the money right away. They didn't wait to see the small machine working. Every university where computers were being built, there were delays. Harvard, MIT, University of Pennsylvania, nobody finished their machines. In fact, a joke that went around is that the time to finish a computer, you had to predict when you went for grants when you finished a computer. Time to finish was a constant. I mean, you said you're going to finish it in 2 years. After 2 years, you said you're going to finish it in 2 years. And it went on like that forever. Remember, that was 46 people started building them. And finally, in 1949, only two were completed. The first 2 machines in the world that were completed after UNIVAC, after ENIAC rather, the EDGAC in Cambridge, UK, with Morris Wilks, and the same year at Manchester, Fred Williams and Tim Colburn had Ferranti build a machine they called the Mark I. Meanwhile, back home at Toronto, they kept needing more calculation. The seaway was getting really critical, and Chalk River, Atomic Energy Corporation, they needed a lot of computers, and they decided really to build computing lab. And this is thanks to W.B. Lewis, who was the head of Chalk River, to do the computer design and building and research at the university, because that way the knowledge would become more available. If they did it at Chalk River, it would have to be secret. And I think they wisely, and very luckily for us, decided that the Chalk River kept supporting us. So that's why we got the $300,000, because Chalk River said, I guess I do want to go back one. They proposed, when the Ferranti Mark I came, Lewis said, 2 things happened. First of all, the new Labour government came into the UK. The first thing it did was canceled all grants over £100,000. So suddenly, Ferranti, which was almost ready to deliver an electronic computer to the British atomic computer, had no customer for it. Well, Lewis heard about this, and he says, you know what? I'll get these people at Toronto to buy it. But we had $300,000 in the bank, and we said, no thanks, Mother, I'd rather do it myself. We said no. But then they made us an offer we couldn't refuse. They said, if you use your $300,000 to buy that computer, we'll give you $150,000 right away. And then when you come to build your big computers, we'll top it up as we need it. Well, as I say, we couldn't refuse that. We get the Ferranti right away, and they promised to support us when we wanted to build our own computers. So yes, we said we would take it. Well, we called it Ferranti, U of T, so Trixie Worthley thought of the name Ferret. And Ferret was an electronic computer. It filled a room, about half the size of this room. It had 10,000 vacuum tubes in it. The HighSpeed store consisted of 32,000 words, each of 32 bits. Now, 32 bits, you see, would be about 6 characters long, so that's getting reasonable. The auxiliary memory with a magnetic drum. It had 6 B tubes for instruction modification. That's a technical point that computing people will understand. It used teletype paper tape for input-output, and it had a kind of very primitive operating system in which the paper tape would be scanned for special characters which would initiate programming. So the special character of the paper tape would take you into the electronics store, which had your program. Of course, the Turing machine, the virtue of a Turing machine is that the storage, you can contain the set of instructions to operate the machine are in memory. And you can change that memory as you need it. That's the feature that makes it a Turing machine. So this was a true Turing machine. Well, once we decided in 1951 to build it, I was sent to Manchester for 6 weeks. Actually, I met Alan Turing at that time. I had authority to hire people to come back with me to Toronto, which I did. I hired Peter Bandler and Audrey Bates, who were programmers at the Manchester machine to come back with Toronto, and Christopher Strachey was a very high-tech, very good programmer to come for a while. And I visited, of course, Wilkes in Cambridge, where the EDGAC, that was the first machine done. So I spent 6 kind of useful weeks learning how to program the machine. When Ferret arrived, there was tremendous excitement. Huge public interest. People called the thing a giant brain. Now, it was giant, all right, but I'll tell you that was no brain. It was a no-brainer. It was about 1/1,000,000th the capacity of your laptop. I'm not exaggerating. And it cost 1,000,000 times as much. But it was the second electronic computer ever sold. The first one was the UNIVAC, which was sold to the American Census Bureau and built in the United States. And this was the second computer ever sold in the world. So there was huge interest in it. And I, at that time, had joined ACM, the Association of Computing Machinery, and I invited them to hold their, ACM was formed in 1947, so I invited them to hold their 4th national conference in Toronto. And they were hugely interested in this machine, because the only machines that were working so far were the EDGAC and the ENIAC, and so seeing an electronic computer. Remember, the huge vacuum was huge cooling systems down in the basement and power plants and things like that. But everybody was working on computers in the United States wanted to need a machine. So they came to Toronto. And then we knew that we were going to do programming, so we started hiring people. Professor Hume, J.N.P. Hume, who was already a professor in physics, so he turned, as I did, into computing. Harvey Gelman, Bullard was a graduate of the chairman of the department, Professor Bullard, and Harvey had done a thesis on computing the magnetism due to the flow of the Earth's core, because Bullard was a geophysicist. Werner Hirschman, Hirschman was interesting. Hirschman was an electrical engineer who actually had been, when the war ended, there was a submarine off the Halifax, off the East Coast, that surrendered to the Canadians. And Trixie Worsley at that time was in the Navy, and Hirschman was the chief engineer of that submarine, with Trixie Worsley, was the destroyer that took the surrender of the submarine. So she met Hirschman again, because he was a computer, and he joined our staff. And shortly after, actually not as soon as this Ferranti came, but shortly after, Professor Howell, who was an applied mathematician, had gone on to UBC, attracted him back. Ferranti had a company in Canada. Ferranti were essentially made transformers, but they had a company in Canada to make transformers. So they decided, they took a couple of their staff, more than a couple of their staff, and they took over the maintenance of the car. Remember, with these 10,000 tubes, 2 or 3 would burn out every day, with vacuum tube. So, so you needed to do constant check on the machine, to check it from the machine. So Ferranti took 2 people, Fred Longstaff and Harold Stein, and taught them how to do the maintenance. And as I say in the slide there, the conference was held in Toronto in 1952, this was September, and everybody in the United States who was interested in computing came to it. I mean, this was really, a very high point for it. And of course, the newspapers were interested, and there was tremendous excitement. Now, one of the main arguments was we needed these backwater calculations for the hydro. So right away, we switched from the tabulating machines onto the Ferranti computer. And actually, in 90 days, the Ferret did calculation that we estimated would have taken 20 man-years had we stayed on punch cards. And the engineers from the hydro took the calculations for 3 seaways. One of them was an all-Canadian seaway, the other was a joint seaway, and I've forgotten what the third one was, but there are 3 separate seaways. The Americans had not wanted to come into the seaway because especially New York and Boston thought they would lose a lot of shipping. The ships would go up, go as they eventually did, to Toronto and Chicago. So Congress wouldn't approve the all-Canadian, wouldn't approve the joint seaway. But when they were presented with the Fed calculation showing that a Canadian seaway could have been all in Canada by flooding a reasonable amount of property, not doable, they changed their mind. And so they immediately had a dramatic effect. I mean, as soon as the New York authorities, the hydro authorities, saw this pile of calculations and saw an all-Canadian seaway, they decided we better come on board. So another calculation we did right away on it, at that time the Avro was being built. Many of you may know the story. It was the first jet fighter designed and built in Canada. And the thing for an aircraft, one of the key calculations called the flutter calculation, essentially when you're flying, the wings kind of flap. It's not quite bird flapping, but the question is, if you built a supersonic plane or anything close to sonic, would they flap so much that that they would break? So this is called a flutter calculation. You have to do this by inverting a matrix. And we had to invert a 40 by 40 matrix, which at that time was would have taken several man-years to invert 40 by 40 matrix. Well, we actually inverted it programmed the Ferranti machine, and it was the second problem we did. We actually did the flutter calculation that made it possible to build the arrow. Well, shortly after, Hume was a professor, and I said Beatrix Worsley was, and they built a program called Transcode, which was pre-Fortran, but it was a compiler. Incidentally, I should have said, well, I will say, when the computer came to us first, it was quite unreliable. Essentially, as I say, a lot of vacuum tubes would burn out during the night, so we would turn the machine over to the maintenance people every night, and then get it back while they found all the burnt out vacuum tubes, and then get it back in the morning and use it all day, and they would have it all night while they did the maintenance. It was so unreliable that the designer said, if you multiply two numbers, you're not sure of the right answer on that. So you got to do it twice. And we did that, and if they differed, then we did it again, took the best 2 out of 3. And the other thing we used to do is, it turns out that one of the companies here named Monroe had built a company, a desk machine, desk calculator, that instead of numbers 1 to 10, goes 1 to 8, and it multiplies. So it had a multiplier, and if you use the numbers 1 to 8, of course, they're 3 bits binary. So essentially, this is really, you could consider a binary machine, because, and incidentally, it's still working. So we used to check the electronic numbers on this machine. So we used a mechanical calculator to check the electronic machine if we had some doubt about the multiplication, if we didn't want to take the best 2 out of 3. Incidentally, the Ferranti Canada got much better by the time we gave up the machine, as I'll say shortly. It was much more reliable. So although the machine started very bad. Getting back though to Hume and Worsley wrote a machine that essentially didn't have to use binary language to program. It was a precursor to Fortran. Fortran, anybody who had any experience with computing will know Fortran, will have used it on the thing, but essentially used decimal numbers. It used, you didn't have to know any 0 1s at all. So it was an interpreter. That's a technical term versus a compiler, but essentially it would program, essentially as you read your paper tape in, it would change your pseudo instructions into real instructions. Incidentally, the programming for that binary machine was pretty hard, but if you think that was hard, I'll come to that in a minute. Hume and Worsley then built this transcode machine, which let you program in simple arithmetic, decimal numbers, and so on. And it was a great success. The University of Saskatchewan used the machine. A graduate student in medicine, who was at that time at the University of Saskatchewan, learned to program and the machine to do cancer treatment, radiation calculation. And Bob Bruce is now a professor, or he's retired now, but he came and did most of his work at the U of T in the medical school. I myself worked on school timetables, programming the machine to do school timetables. We used the machine to translate card catalogs of the library into digital forms. And the program, the library, this was the librarians, of course, learned to program. And that program was so good that it was format was adopted by the Library of Congress in the United States. And once the Library of Congress had adopted, all the libraries in the world adopted that card catalog that had been designed at the U of T and tested on the computer. So it had a huge effect. We did problems in the computer graph and the 4-color problems. I won't go into that now. We did simulations of traffic control on the computer. Incidentally, Kate's, Joe, are you in his room? I can't see him, but I know he's on the list for the dinner tonight. So I think he's in here. Joe had a remarkable career. He founded companies. He did the simulation of computerized traffic control. And you wouldn't know as traffic at Toronto now that we were the first city in the world to have computerized traffic control. If you look at the traffic we have in the city today, you'd never think that Toronto was, world-class traffic control. Air Canada reservation system. Actually, I think this was done in some of the later computers. And computerized reading of postal code was all done first at U of T computers. I'm not sure these were Ferret or machines that came a little bit after Ferret, but they are all done they were world first that were all done tested on this site. So, there was really a tremendous series of firsts as a result of that Ferranti machine. Let's haven't. First project, Bell Relay, UTech. Okay. Okay. This is where I want to be. We decided after a few years. What happened? We decided that.
Sorry.
Pardon?
I just.
Okay. No, that's where I wanted to be. Okay. High tech, kind of expect me to be familiar with that. As I said, the Ferranti we decided to replace the Ferranti with an IBM 650. Now the 650 was it was a vacuum tube machine, and it was no faster than Ferret. On the other hand, IBM started to build them. Incidentally, I think I had it on the slide. About this time, the manufacturing machine went from universities to companies. Companies saw a market. So companies started to build a machine, and IBM, who at first had been quite dismissive of computers, electronic computers, decided to build one, and they built the 650, it had a very good program written by Norman Machine called SOAP, which made the machine quite fast, speeded up the machine, but even then, speeded up, it wasn't much faster. It really wasn't faster than the Ferranti machine. But, so programming became very popular. But, if you think programming was hard, if you had one of the IBM relay machines, the IBM had, after the tabulating machine, had a machine called 405, which, remember, the tabulating machine, 200, could only do additions. The 405 could do multiplication. If you wanted a program machine to do multiplications, you did this. You wired up something. So this taught him this is a program for a relay machine. So if you think electronic programming is hard, try this as an alternative. The program for the 650 was enormously popular. IBM sold hundreds of machines, so there are apps all over the world. Every university was building apps, and people pooled them. Programming, incidentally, when you rented a machine from IBM, at first you'd only rent them. Later on, you could buy them. When you rented a machine, the programs were free. and they were all pooled. They were all sort of open source. So the 650, they sold hundreds of 650, and in 1958 we replaced the Ferret with a 650, but we considered it temporary. We were still intending to build UTEC. Ferret was dismantled and sent to Ottawa because atomic energy was still doing some computing, and reassembled there. It eventually was dismantled altogether. I don't know how long it lasted, because everything once it got to Ottawa, everything was secret on it. So we replaced Ferret temporarily with the 650. And as I say, sorry, I want to go back. That was 1958. At that time, I began to realize that computing was regarded as a kind of proletarian mathematics. It wasn't real mathematics. But I decided that there was a real future of computing, and that all the work we were doing, although we had graduates doing theses, there was no department. There were no courses, no credit courses, and so on. And so in ACM, I became chief editor of the journals, and I decided, well, you had to do research, you had to teach courses, you had to get credit courses in the credit department. You had to work your way up to become respectable in computing. The first courses we taught, actually, talking of early 50s, had very large classes, because actuaries, accountants, and bankers and engineers were interested. So they didn't care for credit. It was, of course, with non-credit. We taught it in the School of Continuing Study with non-credit, and we had very large courses. Several hundred people who would take these computing courses. Myself and Hume and Howell started teaching computer courses, but they would receive credit in the department. They would be Department of Physics, Department of Mathematics, Department of Electrical Engineering. So I was in physics, Hume was in physics, Howell was in mathematics, and they were credit courses, but there was no Department of Computer Science yet. So we taught courses in mathematics, in computer design, numerical analysis, programming languages, databases, computers and society, and so on. We started teaching, the discipline started subdividing into a lot of specialties. And we started writing books. Hume and I wrote a book in 1958 called HighSpeed Data Processing, which I'm proud of, because it turned out that the Oxford English Dictionary found 12 words that were used in a computing sense that were new words. Words like loop for program instruction. So there are 12 words in the Oxford English Dictionary which Hume and I are credited for enlarging the language. Now, when I told it to a French professor, he says, he says you're immortal. You can only be the first person once. And that's a lot cheaper than the gravestone. I'm really proud of that. With Al Borden, who I know is in the room because I saw him come in, we wrote a book on social issues in 1973, which was the first book ever written on social issues, and had big effect. For example, the head of the Oxford Institute for Computing when I met him in a conference in Haifa, said that he took his career up when he read that book, and he's now the head of computing at Oxford University. So And then I wrote a book with my son, who's in the audience, and writing a technical book with his son is something that's got to be satisfying. So all of these books have made there. And that book, incidentally, when I in 1980, when I was had a sabbatical at Berkeley, it was the textbook for the course at Berkeley. So all of them made their mark in their time. They're all out of date now, of course. In the meantime, IBM started to build the transistors have developed, and it started to build. So they built what were called the 65 series, and the 360 series, and we and our work, our computer work, keep coming up. So we decided that we needed a faster computer, and we sort of gave up on the. We gave up on the. Well, we didn't quite give up on. No, at this time we were still intending to build a faster electronic computer with University of Illinois, but the computers at the university that we had here, the 650, was being used. We got twin 65s. Much more expensive machines. And they started doing administration, scheduling classes, choosing courses, academic transcripts, and so on. So we changed the whole installation. We called it the Institute for Computer Science. Ken Tepper, the Dean of Engineering, he was still in charge. And I was still too young to be in charge of the operation. And that's when they gave me the title Chief Computer, when they became the Institute of Computer Science. Well, these transistorized computers with the 65 were very popular, and Waterloo actually got a 360 before we did. So it emerged as a very innovative computer school, and it had a compiler, WAD4, received worldwide attentions. And every university wanted their own computer. So the Ontario cabinet was the Ontario government was very hard pressed because all universities wanted money for computers. So they invited me to the cabinet, actually, the premier with the faucet, and I persuaded them that yes, the universities needed more computing. So they said, well, we can't afford to put one everywhere. What we'll do is set up 3 computing centers, one at U of T, one at Mississauga, and one is going to be someplace, I think, at London, at Western. And they will be, all the universities in the province could use those. But the universities had none of that. They all wanted their own computers. And the government didn't know what to do. It didn't want it because although I had helped convince the cabinet that they all deserved computers, the university presidents didn't want money to the university to be earmarked. When they get grants from the province, they want to say what they spend it on, not the government. So to get targeted money was against the president. Well, what they finally did was they gave every university money, but that money could be used only for 3 years for computers. Then if the university wanted, they could use it for computer or take them out and do what they want. So the money was no longer targeted. And then overcame the objection of the president. And then so every university started getting those computers. Well then, after a while, in fact, I wrote a paper, how many computers for the university? Not at the U of T. By this time, the library was well into computing, and we had done the computer card catalog, and we had done a lot of other things. The medical department wanted its own computing. There were so many programs. So every department wanted their own computing. I was put on the committee for the chief librarian. Actually, she may be in the audience because she's coming to the dinner, Carol Moore. And then I was put on the committee for the medical department. And everywhere I said, you want to be popular, do what I did. I said, yeah, you all deserve your own computer. So every committee I was on, this was at a time when money was not that hard to get in the university, and you got them all. I mean, so you started multiplying the computers. You know, at the U of T, the administration got its own computer, the library got its own computer, the engineers got their own computer. Everybody got their own computer. And in the meantime, a proposal had come up. In fact, I was present in it, to build a super fast computer, and Illinois got several universities got in on the project, but Illinois got the main money, the University of Illinois at Champaign, we sent some people there, but it was very, very slow so in the meantime, an opportunity came up to get, and as I said, the company started building faster and faster computer, and IBM built the first transistorized computer in 1794, with the first transistorized computer. So it was already, it was already smaller, faster, and cheaper. And then IBM had a policy that for universities, they get a 60% discount. Well, it turned out the computer cost $3 million. But if the university got it cost $1 million. Something happened, something fortunate happened. Imperial Oil was doing all of its scheduling of refineries on an IBM 794, an IBM 779. Because essentially, if you reschedule every week, you can change the products to meet the market demand. So this was not a research computer. It was a computer that the production department needed. So they signed a contract with us to buy time from our 790. Which is just a year later became upgraded to 794. If you sold time to this company, you had to, IBM was selling for $300 an hour. And if the university sold time, we were supposed to give IBM $300 an hour. Well, apparently we were the only university in the continent that gave them the $300. All the others sold time and juggled their books. And IBM knew that. But they didn't want to sue the university. But we were honest. So we sold time, and the friend of a contract with Imperial Oil signed a multi-year contract. We got $1 million. So I came up to the president, you see, and he said, "Here we own this computer. Here's $1 million from Imperial Oil to buy this computer." And that happened. I remember when I went to see Lucas, and you know what he says? You get noticed by this, but this is the first time I've ever signed a check for over $1 million. And the president notices these things. So, as I say, we got that machine. It was a great success. It was the fastest computer in Canada at the time. Very shortly after, we upgraded to a 94. And as I say, it's a win-win. Win for the university, win for IBM. IBM eventually made more money than if they had sold a machine for the original price. Actually, the amount of money that they got for the machine eventually, with the $300 an hour, was over the original price. So IBM won and Imperial Oil won because they did send all their people to Toronto instead of down to the United States and a lot of travel time. So we decided to form the Institute of Computer Science. No, let's go back here. I still want to, sorry. And we formed we first formed the graduate department. That's right. The university decided that all the institutes that were non-teaching should be phased out. So this time we've been teaching graduate courses. So I asked for permission to get a graduate, and we needed. Let's see, how are we doing for time? Well, I think we'll go through very quickly on this on here. Anyway, I got permission from the Physics, Mathematics, and Electrical Engineering Department to form a graduate department, because at that time, graduate departments were not funded. In 1966, we formed an undergraduate department. Tom Hall became the chair. I was the chair of the graduate department, but when we formed an undergraduate department, let Tom Hall walk. I always felt administration was an occupation where the urgent preempts the important. So I wasn't that keen on administration. Glad to have Tom Hull do it. He became chairman, and he was a very good chairman. A huge expansion of faculty from the United States. You see the names of professors who are, most of them still here yet, and our own graduates, many of them were taken into the department. Department grew very rapidly, multiple cross appointments, research groups, with electrical and computing engineering, knowledge media design group, dynamic graphic group, faculty information and mathematics. At one point, the computer science was the largest department in the university. There's a complicated history department since then, but it declined, but it's on a growth again. Currently, the computer science department here is one of the largest in the world. It has an eclectic collection of courses. It has, and research groups. It has DCS, Women in Computer Science. The faculty, multiple prestigious awards. Steve Cook of Turing Award, the most famous award in ACM, now worth $250,000. I'm co-chair of the award committee. And incidentally, Jim Horning, my co-chair, and his wife are in the audience there today. Hume and myself got the Order of Canada. Just this last 2 months, Mark Riverman, Jeffrey Hinton, and Charles Dracow in the department here all won major awards. So, and a new ranking of computer science department that came out from England this year ranked the department here 8th in the world, beating out Harvard and lots of other famous universities. So, well done to say the least. The discipline exploded. As computer became smaller, faster, cheaper, trying to predict the consequences were more difficult. I was often asked, did you know what computing would come to? And nobody foresaw the computer that would replace typewriters. Nobody predicted that 8-year-old would program computers. And I have 2 grandsons in the audience sitting in the front row, and both of them were programming before they were 10 in their schools. What's next? Let me just. Sorry. Discipline explodes. Okay. People have said that the computing is advancing so fast that you ought to curtail research in artificial intelligence. It's just threatening to take over thinking. And actually a famous proposal to stop research in artificial intelligence. Well, it's been very difficult and impossible to get international agreement about proliferation of nuclear weapons. So I think it would be impossible to get any kind of agreement to stop artificial intelligence. So I'm convinced that, that you could never get, and nor should you do it, that overall, the nearly universal adoption of computer has served to make computers mankind smarter, socially cohesive. Look at Google and Skype and the social network. And I'm not convinced, I'm not worried at all about the outsmarting computers. Saying that, what's next? Well, in spite of the proposal worries, when the subject of discourse is limited, as it is in chess or Jeopardy or talk about the weathers, we can expect computers to outperform us. But when the range of knowledge is the subject of discourse, and emotions and imaginations, humans will continue to reign supreme. I have no worry about that. That said, there are a couple of caveats. When we get to robot-controlled vehicles, as many predict will soon happen, where does the legal responsibility lie if accidents occur? If there's loss of life because of the action of an autonomous drone, where does the responsibility lie? In Japan, surveillance programs are used to monitor elderly persons. They're close to having robot cameras. What are the privacy and ethical implications of this? The most serious concern, if you look at what's happened in Japan, even a technologically sophisticated society can find itself dangerously unprepared. Robbie Byrne put it, the best laid plans of mice and men getting off the stray. There's a universal recognition that as more devices are connected to the internet, protection is inadequate. What's secure? Better encryption based on entanglement? Complacency is not an option. Well, I just want to finish by a few thoughts on turning 90, finish in the next 3 minutes. There's an old Chinese proverb that goes, may you live an interesting life. Well, I've lived a life with computers and computing. In fact, I've lived through the Great Depression, the Great War and the computing, so I've certainly lived an interesting life. Most of it have been with computers. Can you say it's a life with computers in computing? Yes, you can. But more importantly, it's a life with people. Parents, what people? Parents, siblings, children, grandchildren, family. A lot of them are sitting right there in the front row. With Phyllis, my beloved wife, this picture was taken, appeared in the Toronto Star about 3 years ago, and the department kindly put it up in this frame of the department. So there's Phyllis and me 3 years ago. And she was my wife for 60 years. We shared our life. We shared our reverence for life. Other people, teachers, mentors, students, postdocs, and colleagues. Shipmates, I see one sitting in the third row there. Neighbors, co-authors, there's in the room here. Co-conspirators. So many have been instrumental in creating all we did. People who've been gracious, generous, and giving. So many of those people are here now tonight. I think I've been lucky. I know I've been blessed. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for a wonderful talk, Kelly. And I think we can take a couple questions, although we're running a bit late, so I'll limit it to 2 questions. Anybody else?
Okay.
Yes?
I wonder if you could say anything about the effect of IBM's marketing strategies on the trajectory of the computing industry.
Yes, there's a real history of that. For one thing, IBM would only rent its computers for a long time. It wouldn't sell them. And Eventually, that went to be considered really to impede trade, and the department made them sell computers, made them give their computers for sale. And then IBM gave away programming free. So that helped spread computers very much for a while and spread the program. But then it started to charge. However, the programs, there was really no market for programming at that point because they were all free. Everybody shared it. They were all open source. And then IBM started to market programs, started to sell programs. That created an immense program industry that, in a sense, is bigger now than the industry for the hardware. The software is bigger. And at one time, IBM had 70% of the world share of computers, for computers. But as it be, due to the ruling of the Board of Trade in the United States, had to spread the information around, they started getting other companies. So there is an important issue there, which I've just outlined.
And one more question.
In 1973, you wrote a book called Social Issues in Computing.
Yes, I
So,
did.
what do you think are the most
Pardon?
biggest? What do you think are the largest social issues in computing right now?
Well, I said that there's two of them. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Actually, there has been a computer operated, an autonomous vehicle operated by robots that made the trip from New York to Los Angeles. So there's no doubt that you can program a car to go on highways and in the cities. However, the legal implication, if you do get an accident, who pays? Who's responsible? The programmer, the operator of the car company? So the legal implications of what we can do with the computer are actually hindering the application. So there's an example of a social issue or a legal issue is governing what we do. That's just one example. And privacy implications and ethical implications. Read our book.